and the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman-led architecture firm. Studio Gang, led by Chicagoland architect Jeannie Gang, designed the St. Regis. Did you know skyscrapers are actually designed to sway in the breeze? It's true, you don't want them to be too rigid, you also don't want them to sway too much. So on this tour, I'll tell you about 3 methods of sway reduction, how we calm down skyscrapers. Back row on your left, that white skyscraper with the straight up and down vertical stripes. The process of replacing that marble with granite cost half as much as the entire building did in the first place. Today, the Aon Center is the 4th tallest building in Chicago. One of my favorites is coming up on the right. You're going to see a round yellow dome, kind of shaped like an onion. They got the multicolored lights on it tonight. That is the Intercontinental Hotel, originally built by the Shriners. You know, the guys that wear the fez hats? They like Middle Eastern themes. They put a dome on top. It was originally their athletic association. My favorite fact about that building, you see that dark stone tower sticking up behind the dome? That was originally intended as a place to dock your blimp. They thought in the future we'd all be taking a rigid airship to work, a Zeppelin. So they made a parking spot for blimps. Unfortunately, a blimp has never parked there. Right after they built that, the Hindenburg disaster happened, an infamous blimp explosion, and blimps got a lot less popular. Coming up on your right, Berger said there are no straight lines or sharp corners in nature, therefore our buildings should have none. That's how you get this very round, natural design. Goldberg's idea was to create a city within a city. You can live in your apartment above, park your car in the garage below, dine in the restaurants below that, skate in the ice skating rink, bowl in the bowling alley, even park your boat in the marina underneath. At the time these were built, in the 1960s, the river was still very industrial. There's a lot more factories. Kind of looks like the Parthenon in Athens, stretched out into a glass skyscraper. This is 77 West Wacker. It's a style called neoclassical. It's a new take on classical ancient Greek design. It's pretty cool from a time perspective. We're here in 2023, looking at a building from 1992, which is itself a reference all the way back to ancient Greece. Feel free to take as many pictures as you like. It'll be pretty much non-stop photo ops on a gorgeous night like tonight. But I'll be sure and try to give you a heads up if I see any extra special photo ops. Also, if you want to do group photos or standing photos, let's do those near the end of the tour. Not by name here. I'll let you know when it's a great time for that. And just double check your flashes off. All along beside us on the left here, we have the Chicago River Walk, built in the early 2000s, and it cost $112 million. Each section of the River Walk, between the various sets of bridges, is called a room, and each room has its own unique style and character. The room to our left right now is known as the River Theater, named for those steps that you have in an ancient amphitheater. It's pretty cool how they have the trees going right out of the steps right there. The idea of having a river walk on the Chicago River dates back to 1909. Perhaps the best example is this next huge stone building on the right. It's from 1929, and it's called the Merchandise Mart. This Art Deco style is all about optimism in our machine-made future. You get that sense of optimism from all the straight line columns on the way up, just like we felt we were on the way up. And there's kind of a machine feeling to it, a lot of repetitive patterns. See those gold squares punched into the wall? It feels like something off of an assembly line. There's a machine connotation. And closer to the river, you'll see these 8 statue heads. Those were added in 1953 by Joseph Kennedy, father of former President John F. Kennedy. The Kennedys owned the Merchandise Mart for many years. Those 8 bronze busts are what's called the Merchant Princes, big Chicago businessmen who shaped the city's history and the world of business in general. F.W. Woolworth, A. Montgomery Ward, Marshall Field, for whom the Field Museum of Natural History is named. We'll talk more about the Merchandise Mart on the way back, how big it is, what they used it for. But for now, eyes up, cameras up. After this bridge, you're going to have one of the best views on the tour. We're approaching the junction of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. A lot of our newest skyscrapers in the last 10 years are here. If you were here 10 years ago, you would have been looking at a lot more parking lots. Today is Chicago's trophy case. Welcome to Wolf Woods. If I'm in the front of your picture, I'll try to make it look like I was really guiding it up. So like I said, this is Wolf Point around the city. Bring them here to be frozen and shipped off on trains. Then in the 1970s, an architect named Harry Weiss oversaw a redesign to turn it into apartments. They put about 500 holes into it for windows and balconies. You can just see in the fading light here, the balconies on the far left side. You see that grayish space on the outside of those balconies? That shows you just how thick the walls were. They say when the meatpacking industry moved out in the 1970s, it took the Fulton House 3 months to thaw out. And when they hollowed out those 4 foot. have on the 83rd and 84th floor the blow-through floor of St. Regis. That's facing east down the main branch of the Chicago River towards Lake Michigan. Up ahead on the right, you're going to see a building with a lot of concrete. You ever see those rotating concrete trucks? It took about 500 of those to pour the foundation for 150 North Riverside in 2017. Here's where we talk about our second method of sway reduction, how we calm down skyscrapers swaying in the breeze. You can't see them, but on the top floor of that building, there are 12 tanks holding 160,000 gallons of water. It's called tuned inertial slosh dampers. Basically, when the wind makes the building sway one way, all the water in those tanks naturally sloshes the other way because of inertia. And that helps reduce the amount of time it takes the building to settle, which is important because that's an office building, and that can mean the difference between hitting reply and accidentally hitting reply all. Thanks, I'm really proud of that joke. They used to be here. So when they tore down the old building, they held onto those steel panels and hung them up there as a decorative way to pay homage to the building that came before. The building that's here today is the Bank of America building, 2021. This one cost around $800 million to construct. You'll see it's got these ridges along the side there. That helps shave off the wind. It can get pretty windy on this stretch of the river. They also have very reflective glass. You get a really clear view of the sky bouncing off there, and also its neighbors across the river. The Bank of America building had to deal with that same zoning law, requiring them to leave 30 feet of space between the river and the front of the building. You can see how they dealt with that with these tripod legs. Those steel I-beams that look like a chicken's footprint. The third floor beyond, another Art Deco building from 1929 with those streamlined columns on the way up, just like we felt we were on the way up. It's made of the same material as the Merchandise Mart here, is polished Indiana limestone. If you look closer to the river, you see those circular white lights, the stone obelisk in the middle. This was built right around the time they discovered King Tut's tomb, which caused a craze in American architecture of including Egyptian elements. That's why you see those stone obelisks, those pillars, right by the river in between those lights. So this is Art Deco, very fancy style, very rich time in the Roaring 20s. Now at the end of the Roaring 20s, we had the Great Depression and then World War II. Those 20 years or so are kind of a gap in the architectural record. We weren't building a lot of new big buildings. So when we emerge in the post-war period of the 50s and 60s, these big world-changing experiences have changed our mindset. And that's how you get a new style called black box modernism. On your right, Gateway 1 from 1965 and Gateway 2 from 1967. Black box modernism is all about simplicity and efficiency. We got rid of the more decorative Art Deco style. Now we're just trying to be as efficient as possible. These are people that had lived through the Great Depression. They did not want to waste anything. Now it's the 1980s. We got big hair bands. We're ready to show off again. We got new materials with which to show off. Now we have the ability to curve our glass, just like the river curves. Another great example of contextualism. Also, this isn't like on the tour. I just think it's funny. On the right, you got a fitness center right next to a bakery. One is a place I push my body to the limit every morning, and the other one is a fitness center. Alright. Over on the left, this black box building is 300 South Wacker. And we actually did not used to talk about this building very much on the tour. It used to be kind of just another black box. That is until a few years ago, the owners of the building spent $800,000 to put a giant map on the side of the building. If you look up there, you're going to see a glowing red Lego brick. That's this building. You can see the shape of the river beside it, the junction of the river up above, Wolf Point. Basically a giant "You Are Here" sign. They put themselves on the map by putting a map on themselves. This was filmed right there. The Joker and his gang took zip lines from that glass building, Gateway 4, onto the roof of that stone building. That's actually the old Maine Post Office, 1932. At the time of its completion, this was the largest post office in the world. Why did Chicago need such a big post office? Well, it used to be a major hub for mail order catalogs. If you ordered something from a Sears catalog back in the day, there's a good chance it was processed in this building. In 2016, some developers spent around $900 million to turn it into corporate offices, Walgreens, Pepsi, and others, and they turned the roof of this building into a 3-acre park. There are basketball courts up on that roof, walking trails, pickleball courts, even beekeepers, all on the roof of the old post office. Fewer and fewer of those columns continue. Only 2 of the columns go to the building's full height. That way they can lean together and resist the wind from any direction. The story behind this, the building's lead architect and chief engineer, Fosler Kahn, were sitting around at dinner one night in the 1970s, and there were cigarettes on the table. They realized that if you stacked them end to end, they were weaker, but if you bundled them together at the base, they were stronger. That's how you get the Sears Tower, a building based on cigarettes. It was just stone. Now the show's going on. You're looking at the world's largest projected public art display. It's a free show they do every night starting at 9 p.m. Art on the Mart. There's projectors on the other side of the river that are pointing across to cover the whole front face of the Merchandise Mart. The front face of the Merchandise Mart is 2.5 acres. That's a big projector screen. Notice how the projectors are actually perfectly calibrated to shine everywhere except for the windows. This is still an office building, and if you're working late, you don't want to get blinded by like one piece of a dancing gentleman. Once again, the height is no coincidence. It's the same height as the roof, 55 West Wacker. That's 1989, saying hello to 1968. We have skyscrapers waving hello to each other all across the city, across time. We're gonna go straight ahead down the river, a little bit to the right. You're gonna see vertical white letters that say Morton's the Steakhouse. If you go straight up from there, you'll see a narrow green tower with a shiny golden tip. That golden tipped building is the Carbide and Carbon building from 1929. Designed by the Burnham brothers, the sons of Daniel Burnham. Now, 1929, that was right in the middle of Prohibition, a period of American history where it was against the law to produce or distribute alcohol. Prohibition was not very popular here in Chicago. In fact, right in the middle of Prohibition, in a little subtle act of silent protest, we built a giant champagne bottle. If you see during the day, that building is green just like a bottle, and the gold at the top looks like the foil on a bottle of champagne. That's intentional. That is real gold up on the top there. It's very thin, 24 karat gold. It's about half as thick as saran wrap. It's even thinner than saran wrap, and it's real gold on the Carbide and Carbon building. Native settler to set up a trading post here in Chicago. He was married to a native woman, who's essentially the city's founder. And he set up that first original trading post right over there, where the Apple Store is today. The Apple Store is from 2017. The trees next to the Apple Store are real. The trees on the inside are fake. I checked. Like I said, the Apple Store sits on the site. The first non-native settler set up a trading post. Also, Fort Dearborn, the first star on the Chicago flag, was right around this area as well. This was originally, we hit fast forward. The first non-native settler sets up a trading post where the Apple Store is today. Then we have Fort Dearborn right around the same area. The city grows some more. It's made out of wood. And in 1871, Great Chicago Fire. We rebuilt, host the World's Fair of 1893, giant Ferris wheel. In the year 1900, we reversed the direction of the Chicago River. In 1908, the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. I'll tell you when it happens again. It's not soon. 1916, Navy Pier. Early 1920s are building office buildings that look like cathedrals, like the Wrigley Building. Late 1920s, that's Art Deco, like the Merchandise Mart. Till the Roaring 20s come to a roaring halt with the Great Depression and World War II. It looks like our time lapse is frozen for about 20 years. No new big buildings because we're busy being Great Depressed and fighting in World War II. Then in the 50s and 60s, you have black box modernism, culminating in the biggest black box of them all, the Sears Tower, 1974. For the rest of the 70s and 80s, the river's still industrial and smelly, but that would change in the 90s and early 2000s. As the river gets cleaner, you have more residential buildings on the river, like 2009, Trump Tower, second tallest building in Chicago. 2012, I visit Chicago for the first time, take the river tour, and the city would never be the same. 2016, the Chicago Cubs finally win another World Series. 2021, the St. Regis, third tallest building in Chicago, tallest building in the world, designed by a woman architect. And on the time lapse goes, until about 75 minutes ago when an incredibly intelligent group of passengers got on a boat to listen to a guy with a mustache point at buildings. Did you guys have a good time today?